Okay, so welcome everyone who's joined. We're really excited for this awesome webinar. This is really fun also for us at CloudShare to kick this off with the team from Skilljar by Gainsight. This is going to be an excellent webinar. We're getting rid of, this isn't like fluffy, up in the air, theoretical. No. You're going to hear real stories from real people about what is happening in the world for customer education, because we know that customer education is a major part of every organization, becoming more and more critical. We've even seen customer education be introduced earlier on in companies' organizational flows. So we're seeing a major shift of customer education from being just one of those nice to have, that it's been siloed with its own siloed goals to like a must have, part of a larger organizational goal. So with this shifts, obviously it can be scary for a lot of people, but we're going to help you out, and you're going to hear from some really incredible professionals who really understand the field, not just keep up with the market trends, but really get to work, get their hands dirty. So we're going to hear from them, and let me hand it off to Caroline if you want to talk yourself.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll quickly introduce, I like how it's me kidding, like my customer, your customer, our customers here today. We've got Elyce and Alex, which are coming from CloudShare, no, from AuditBoard and from Nozomi Networks. So those will be our experts today, kind of guiding us through. But what I want to do is tee us up with a recent research report we did here at Skilljar right before joining Gainsight. And I think it'll become really clear why that acquisition took place because of the trends we are seeing in the market. A lot of the fact that just saying education for folks, your titles can change day by day. It feels like where you're putting your education content, depending on where a customer's at, can change. So rather than just sometimes being only the academy owner, if you have an academy, you're also thinking, right, the help center, the community, we have courses, we have in-app, like what is this experience like, not just for the designer behind it for this experience, but the learner, and like what are they expecting? What moment do they want to go to which resource? And how are you serving it up? And people are really expecting that experience to be a lot more dynamic now, right? So how do you navigate this depending on your team size? So when with the next stat that we found as well, when you move through, you're going to see, okay, great, 90% are responsible for building on-demand courses and quizzes, 86 for onboarding programs, 60% creating certifications. That sounds traditional to a lot of us in like the customer education space specifically. But then, okay, great, you're also being tasked with this 50% help centers, in-app guides, and 20% managing communities. And that's just like touching it on the head, right? So then you're thinking, where should my team sit, right? So with like our next stat that we uncovered through this survey, you'll kind of start to see that the differences start to show up, like you're sitting in either customer success, customer enablement, you're in marketing, product, or professional services. One of my favorite responses in the open field from one of our friends here that I did a roundtable with was, our team is split amongst marketing and CS. It's complicated. Like quite literally, any customer I talk to, any prospect, anyone in our community, it's a bit tough to tag down, right? You think of the folks here today when they're going to introduce themselves, titles are so different. It doesn't always have education in the title. It might be your broader in your digital CX. You might be X, Y, and Z. So not alone as a marketer where it's hard to find actually who are the folks who are in charge of education. It's everywhere, right? We're noticing it's across these teams. And that can cause obviously like what we'll get into some great things, but also some confusion at times for your own role of like, who do I need to get buy-in from? Where should I sit for the most budget? How do I prove that I have impact? What is my life as kind of this, I don't know what word I'm trying to come up with of like, you're like, taking a van across the country and deciding where you're stopping every now and again on teams. So yeah, those are just kind of those things to anchor you that like everyone's with you. This was like over 100 folks, talked to a lot of them directly too in our report, and just it was honestly a bit of a therapy session too, of where we're just like where we're at and like what's great and what's going well, but just like validating your experience and kind of like the exciting things that can mean for customer education. And so, hey, wouldn't it be gorgeous if on the previous slide, right, we're like, oh, this is as simple as it is of a future team. Like you've got customer success, scaled CS with an academy, a community, help center. That would be pretty. Like that might be what some org structures are. Not everyone's there. So then ultimately we're going to tie it in, and all the questions that are coming after from our panelists, who will definitely get to fact check me on all the presented information and all of the data, is unfortunately still, if you ask, like, does my C-suite know the impact of customer education? You can tell, like, there are very few people who strongly agree. There's some who do, and it can depend on who you are hired by. Honestly, I've talked to a lot of folks who say the reason I joined my company is because the C-suite already believed in customer education. So they just have to build the case further versus actually needing to make the case in their company. And we were just recently at Pulse, Gainsight's major CS, CX, PX, CC, CE, everything post-sale, which is what we'll talk about, conference, where in a room we asked a group of pretty much y'all to raise your hand, like, on all these questions that I just presented. This one, everyone was kind of laughing, right? Like all the others like, yep, we're sitting on different teams. We've got all this going on. This one showed up and they're like, yeah, maybe a couple hands and like some crickets. So we're here today to help you feel more confident in that. And again, turning the mic back over to the folks who actually have the answers for us. So let's get into it with Jeremy kicking off our first topic.
Sorry, I was unmuted for a second. Okay.
I was going to
Well,
say, I'm like, news
yeah,
desk
yeah.
is back. She's
All
back.
good, all good. I actually we usually kick things off a little earlier, but I just wanted, we were in a good flow. I actually wanted to do a little fun thing that we do here at CloudShare. We do like a poll question. Now, the poll question is somewhat, you're going to be like, what does this have to do with anything? But the poll question is, first of all, to show that we really want you guys to participate, get involved. This isn't, I think nobody here just wants to ramble all the time. We all want to hear your voices. So during the session, please ask questions in the QA section, the chat section, wherever it is. Ask your questions. And to start things off with a question we're going to ask you guys is, the big question is, what is your order for cereal? Okay. Do you go cereal then milk, milk then cereal, or I don't eat cereal? Now, even if you don't eat cereal, like, what would you done? Everyone used to eat cereal at one point in their lives before we started getting into
I didn't know
gluten-free
how
carb.
spicy this was going to start. And I was going to say, are we bringing in the almond mom trend of like, but do I get to eat cereal? So
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
going
No,
to answer hypothetically.
yeah, hypothetical. Seems like everyone's doing cereal and milk. Okay, I just want to check it out because now you're gonna be like, what does it have anything to do with what we're talking about? Because in the end of the day, everyone kind of has a different order that they go about with their customer education, how they go about it, how they build customer education. Some people build it from the onboarding part and then build their way up. And you'll hear some people start from certification and then build their customer education down. Okay. So there is no wrong way to build education. There is a wrong way to, eat your cereal. It should always be cereal then milk. I don't even know who would do otherwise. But when it comes to customer education, by the way, 100% people, I'm going to share the results here. 100% people did cereal then milk. So I'm happy we're talking to the right audience
I feel
here.
like the old days, though, the true thing is if there was milk left after I had my cereal, that meant, oh no, I need to put more cereal in that milk. And so you just keep it going. Hey guys, that's a life cycle of cereal and customer success. So there you go. Yep.
I'm gonna throw
Exactly.
a curveball out there. I eat cereal for dessert. I don't eat it for breakfast.
Oh,
Is
interesting.
that weird?
I've been
I don't
thinking
know.
about that lately when I'm walking down the grocery store. I'm like, cereal kind of sounds like a great dessert. So thank you, Alex. We will be trying that out tonight to celebrate this webinar.
Or
Okay,
no
great.
milk. Just skip the milk. Sometimes you just need dry cereal and it's delicious.
That's
Yeah.
Lucky Charms. Like you can only do it with certain
Yeah.
cereals. Yeah,
Mhm.
like it has to be like cookie crisp. Like how is that? Anyway, guys, we will
Anyways.
get back to it.
Yes,
Great
we'll get back to
question.
it. So anyways, so again, there's no right or wrong way to build your education. But let's start where a lot of people start from. Let's start where the customer education journey, I would say, starts for most customers, which is the onboarding. Okay. Now, again, I don't have to remind everyone here, you're all customer educators. You know the importance of a smooth onboarding process. Study after study after study, we see, okay, onboarding is so critical. A good onboarding process means better adoption, better retention. Okay. Shorter time to value obviously is crucial for everyone. So as soon as I get my users up and running, they'll see the value of my product better, they'll use it better, and they'll achieve their goals faster, and everyone's happier, than they'll renew. So, but of course, everyone also wants a high touch, to be handheld through it all, and that white glove service isn't always available for everyone. So how do you scale your business? And I'm going to throw this to Elyce first, without feeling like you've ghosted the customer, because you just can't possibly be high touch with everybody all the time. Tell us a little bit about how you'd experience that.
Yeah. So I'll do a quick intro. I'm Elyce Ladany. I'm the Senior Manager of Digital Education at AuditBoard. So that's just a fancy way of saying we're responsible for customer-facing resources, self-paced pieces that customers can go to learn how to adopt our platform, adopt our tools, and making sure that they can find success with it. So I own AuditBoard Academy, which is all self-paced courses. And then, as Caroline said earlier, we also own AuditBoard Help Center. So it's how do you find that balance to make sure that you have enough in front of the customer, but you're also not burning out yourself and what you're doing, because you can't possibly keep up with all of it at the same time. So knowing all of this, in the past year specifically, it's ironic that Gainsight acquired Skilljar, because we were already on Skilljar. We were a Skilljar customer for years. And we've done a lot of things to build out our academy program. We have courses, we have certifications, we've done a lot of work to try and up the maturity level of what we're doing so customers can access us where they need to. When it comes to onboarding, we lean pretty heavily on some of our other teams that also happen to use Gainsight. Our customer segmentation, as maybe some of you have, we have our enterprise customers that get that one-on-one with the CSM. We have a large chunk of our customers, we call them pulse segment, that they might not have that one-on-one opportunity with a CSM. So it's how do we're really focusing in on those customers that absolutely need this self-paced support. We use our community hub for a lot of things, and that's a first stop, first direction for customers when they're just starting out. We created some learning paths in our academy. Hey, you're brand new. Pick your module, pick your role, and then we'll walk you through. Here are ways that you can adopt the platform. And honestly, the rest of it is we want you to find what you need, get what you need, and then leave. We want you to get back to your job so that way you don't have to focus on the learning. The learning is an easy access point for you. So when I think about onboarding, we want to make sure those awareness of those resources are front and center. We could use email contacts, journey, like 180-day journeys, email saying, hey, you're at this stage, this is your use case, here's what we would expect you to complete. And we try and collaborate as much as possible with, here are the resources that'll help from Help Center, from Academy, and try and guide them through those first 180 days. Beyond that, we're still figuring it out, honestly. And the 180 days is just for some of our products, but it's a starting point. So that way, those folks that may not have that straight up touch point can still have that support. They feel like, oh, AuditBoard's got me. And it's not the easiest thing to set up, but once we did, we've seen a lot of success and positivity from our customers. So that's from my side of things.
I have one funny thing to add here that you made me think of, Elyce, is I can't recall which customer, but they said something to me that was very enlightening of when you think of traffic or how many, people took a course or how much traffic you have in a certain Help Center article, how it can also be like an inverse understanding of like, is that a good thing, right? Like you think of like websites, like for marketing where you're like, oh, we had this webinar, so many people went, it was so amazing, versus sometimes you're like, if we've got this many people on this Help Center article, is this like a product feedback that we should be giving, right? Like it is helpful, but like that's clearly our biggest issue. Do you have feedback loops with, your product team to be like, it's great we have this much traffic on this page, but clearly like we got some work to do so that you're all like, transit that information is moving along.
Yeah, feedback loop is kind of the buzzword of this year and last, and probably moving forward. Truly trying to figure out. We have so many inputs of customer feedback. We have surveys in our courses. We have an idea section in our community hub. CS is hearing about it a lot. So we're trying to figure out how do we centralize all of that so that way product isn't trying to sift through everything and we can summarize it together. So we're looking into some vendors, some tools that might be able to help consolidate some of that information. I know I'm most interested in what's coming from Community Hub and from CS, so I don't always have visibility into those. But so conversations are definitely starting. we haven't seen it happen yet, but I know that at least we're identifying the inputs and we can start to add that to our roadmap. Where can we start to plug in these updates that we're seeing pretty consistently?
Yep.
Yeah.
Back to you, Jeremy, after that hot take.
Yeah. No, now very hot take. No, very interesting process. Now, what about Alex? You have I know we talked about this before. Tell us a little bit how your process works, how you kind of built yours out.
Yeah, so hey everybody, I'm Alex Silber. I work at Nozomi Networks. We're a cybersecurity platform for operational technology and Internet of Things based infrastructure and those types of organizations. And honestly, we kind of took a different approach to our onboarding experience. Historically, it's a lot of what Elyce was describing. Like what's short to the point to get people back to what they need to be doing every day. And for us, because of the technical nature of what we're trying to do with our platform and the problems we're trying to solve for, we needed to get a little bit more detailed up front. So we actually started with some certifications, right? But what is interesting about that kind of approach is we've learned a lot very, very quickly about, hey, yeah, there are some people who need to go into the weeds, and there are some people who need just a little bit of information to get going. And so there's a wide spectrum of folks who need this information to be successfully onboarded. And yes, some of it's role-based, but sometimes there's some segmentations within those roles that you need to address. And so, kind of thinking towards what Elyce was talking about before, I'm hearing a lot about, onboarding is really about driving engagement and making it sticky up front and improving time to value. And to me, that starts with knowing your audience. And so what we've learned is to ask those questions up front. Can we help you self-select who you are when you're in the academy so that you get into the content that you need right up when you need it? Are we addressing what you need when you need it? So talking about things like surveys and recognizing what Caroline was saying before, like, hey, if you're coming back into something that's supposed to be a 3-minute video and supposed to be a one and done, and you're going back in 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 times, that might be an indicator that, something needs to be adapted a little bit. So, again, going back to our use case, again, cybersecurity, a little bit more technical in nature. We learned very quickly that our audiences, even in their certifications, they wanted more interactions with our products. They wanted to know they wanted to understand the why of what they're learning at the same time as learning about what our product can do to help them. And so, we use both Skilljar and CloudShare for that. So during our onboarding program, we actually have a lot of interactive labs that kind of reinforce what we've described in the more text-based, image-based standard of on-demand learning. But also we support our instructor-led trainings with that as well. And really at the end of the day, being able to get into the product during the onboarding process and reinforce and try something and fail in a comfortable environment was really helpful to make sure that people understood the answer of why they should care immediately. And that to us was the sticking point that helped drive engagement to continue to invest your time in something like a certification, which could be a little bit lengthier than not. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better picture of what we've been doing at Nozomi Networks.
Yeah, I love that point where I think it comes up with a lot of folks where intellectually you can just like a quiz, like, right, I can study information, I could take the quiz, be like, oh, I aced it. The second I go to do it in real life, I'm like, whoop, do not know how to apply. It quite literally happened to me at our recent event. I have a good friend in our team who has this like awesome camera with all these different like switches, not my level of expertise. He looked me straight in the eye, explained how to do it 3 steps perfectly. And I was like, I hear you, but I didn't do it. He leaves the room, immediately go blank, don't know how to do it. And it's so funny, especially at like an education conference. I was like, great use case. I needed to take a course. So just like really letting people like actually interact with that, I think is super key. And then what you started to touch on too is what will lead us into our next topic, which is this idea of like onboarding can be very specific about you did just buy our product. You really are like needing to get to know to use the product. But what does the like life cycle look like past onboarding, knowing how to use the product, going on long term, right? You're like, we're also an educational partner for a lot of folks. It's helping them navigate their career, like more thought leadership information, just generally like up leveling yourself, as well as then, as we know, new features come out, new problems arise. So you are with this customer past just getting them onboarded. So let's get into that a little bit. Alex, if you want to kick us off on how you then take it to the next step or what that looks like for you in your
Sure.
team.
Yeah, happy to do that. So, I mentioned a little bit about how it's a little unusual that we started with certifications, but it's worked out really well for us. Well, one of the things that we've learned through that process that's, really important to think about in terms of driving engagement is that you don't want somebody to take a certification that's good for, say, for instance, 2 years and then disappear for 2 years. You want them to come back because your product's not standing still for 2 years. It's constantly being iterated upon and added to. And so for us, it's really acknowledging that it has a limited shelf life, and you want to kind of have that more video streaming kind of mentality where every time you log in, there's something new and valuable for you to be able to engage with. And so for us, we are going back to roots, back to our roots and kind of moving backwards from our certification to start introducing smaller pieces of content that address different roles, different needs, and different perspectives to sort of get people to come back for more. So for us, it's taking a cold hard look at our current certifications, of which we have 3 right now, and breaking them out even further. So for example, we have one that's focused on our engineer audience, which is our primary audience. It's our biggest certification. This is going to scare some of you, but it can take up to 18 hours to complete. But the cool thing about
Don't
that is
worry,
that
then everyone, I'm not going to become an engineer. We just, we just,
you know that the good thing about that is that they are true experts of the platform at that point. So, what we're trying to do now is break it up into smaller pieces, really make things a little bit more granular in nature to cater to a wider audience. I mentioned before that we have both on-demand and instructor-led trainings. Well, we also have custom trainings on top of that. So by leveraging a more segmented model with our content, where we break up that 18-hour certification into maybe multiple smaller courses, maybe distributed in a learning path, maybe inserting different types of interactive labs along the way, we can kind of rearrange those pieces in a way that, again, thinking back to that audience, we're able to provide you with something that's absolutely curated and relevant to you from the moment that you log into the academy so that you can continue to engage with that content over time. But additionally, and this is kind of a big learning for us with the certification, is that when recertification comes along, you don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel and explain everything that you covered in the initial courses. It's, hey, how do we change management, right? Like, how do we tell you about what's happened along the way and help you think about what you might have been doing previously and a little bit differently. Usually it's to, make things a little bit easier, but sometimes it's adding new things that can help you address other problems. So for us, it's introducing things like a study guide, practice exams, things that allow us to curate that content again for the audience's need in that moment so that when they take that recertification, they are aware that, oh, there's this new feature, that new feature. Oh, and we kind of promote some other content that's available covering that in more depth that they can then pursue later on. And that's been really great. So, long story short, engagement wise, we learned that sometimes it's the little things that really make a difference. And, being vulnerable with that is really key as well, because, some things work, some things don't work. And, you don't know until you try.
yeah. And that's where, again, that's like the plug that we'll get to at the end, though. You need to know what's not working, where I think we've heard from a lot of folks when you are building, and some people here might relate to not yet having, the right systems or whatever. But like, if you can't track what's actually happening or who's consuming it, you're kind of in this world of like, what is happening. You could just kind of have like a gut feeling of a course, but just like knowing that data day to day for you to be informed and make decisions that eventually affect like your entire program is super important. And I think this slide is hilarious to me in a way of the connection here, and that'll get to Elyce's point, I think, that we've chatted about with after day 30, right? You are on a large team that has a lot of complex, different folks involved in different parts of the full customer lifecycle. Can you kind of explain what that's like at AuditBoard as you like unleash these customers? And that was not an AI jargon term. It came straight out of my mouth and I said unleash. So unleash away, Elyce.
No problem. Yeah. Yeah, just to paint a picture, we sit in our customer advisory services organization, which is really just customer success. And then we are also under customer experience. So we actually have a wider team that's all about enabling our customers. So like I said, community, help center, academy, we have instructor-led training, all of that sits under this customer experience umbrella. So we've started to do more with like, we have digital experience under that. They're in charge of community hub. They're in charge of proactive outreach. They're the ones that have that access, especially in Gainsight. When I think about post 30 days, they're the ones looking at Gainsight, supporting our customer success and CSM organizations, trying to identify how do we become more proactive in our approaches to customers that perhaps dropped off after 30 days or after 90 days because onboarding's over, time to get into the platform. We don't always see that re-engagement when it comes to our tool. So what we did is last year we did a customer education survey, and we sent out a survey using Gainsight contacts and the Gainsight emails just to simply ask, what do you want to see in your education? What are the types of tools you enjoy? What are the types of things that you're missing? Trying to get more of that customer feedback. And the surprising thing, the number one thing was awareness. They didn't know Academy was an option. Well, shocking, right? You would think that they would know from the start, but really, if we're selling to a certain buyer, the people who are being the admins of our platform may not have been included in those buyer conversations. So the big aha for us, like, how do we promote awareness at more touch points in the customer's journey rather than only at the beginning? So it's a slow process, but we're trying to see how do we empower our internal teams to advertise for Academy, for community. How do we try and work with our customers that we already have to see where's the gap? Where would this have been helpful to learn that we have Academy material on this? Probably the most exciting thing, our certifications, we have 7 right now. They're not 18 hours, they're very short, but we have a few of them. Customers may not have the awareness because they weren't in part of the original buying process. So we launched a campaign in collaboration with our digital experience team. Let's target folks that have started the certification but haven't finished it. We use our Skilljar content in order to help build that up. We have to target the folks that maybe did the prerequisites for the certification, but then they didn't actually take the certification and they just have one more step to go. We advertise it in community. We had all of our like touch points come through, and we've seen a huge bump in just certifications over the last 6 months. It's been a great campaign from one of my instructional designers. But just knowing that little bit, if we were just focusing on certifications, what could we do if we were focused on certain areas like expansion of what customers are doing or renewals? Like, how can we try and start digging into those areas that really customer education hasn't touched, at least at AuditBoard? What are things that we could do to prove that business value so that way we can become more of a power within the company?
Yeah, I think you make that point. I was like, Jeremy and I are probably about to say, like, truly the thought of us being self-involved as like humans, even as our website, as marketers, thinking that someone just knows it exists, they're going directly to it, they're going to find it, like, if you build it. No, that's the point now of like, hey, it might be that you embed an in-app notification to get you back to the academy, or like you share an academy course in the community because someone's trying to learn. Like, it's again bringing back that idea of like honestly marketing your content in the academy, right? And that's your hub where like you have all the analytics and what you need to know. But the fact of like, you're going to have to get in different channels in different places, because unfortunately we don't live in a world where everyone's like, what am I going to do today? I'm going to go search to this academy. That would be great, but it's not always the case. So
yeah, it's like you have to engage everybody, right? It's not just your customers or your partners who are using your content. It's the internal folks and addressing their needs. Everybody's needs are just as important.
yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's also so important for you, we talk about this as being, from the silos to the systems is, our very topic. And it's so important that the communication is across everyone. I think everyone learns this in every organization, and from the marketing department, from the sales department, that like, you just need to communicate with everybody so they realize what you're launching so they could be your advocates. Because like, if you can get that buy-in from your CS team to say, hey, by the way, we have this awesome academy, that's running, why don't you check this out? then they're going to be more involved. You're going to get people more engaged with your content because, especially an 18-hour certification course, probably you spent so many hours building that out. I can't even imagine how much time. And you're just
We're
like,
also fans.
Our
Like
audience loves it, by the way. They love it. They want more
that's why I
of
was like,
it.
I'm clearing the record.
Yeah.
This is the kind of audience. This is so important. Every webinar, we're like, remember that like ICP of different customers where it's like, they're like, give me a 40-hour course. I want to
Yeah.
be so good at this. Like you really have to know. And that's why like copying and pasting someone's strategy to yours. And like, if you're in like B2C about like how to apply like that video camera I couldn't use, 18 hours might be, maybe I need it, but a bit excessive, right?
Yeah.
So it's just knowing your audience.
Exactly. And again, at least having that survey of seeing what's working, I think that touches on a really important point of you need to create the content that gets your users most engaged. Find a way to give them what helps them learn, whether it's like, an awesome videos, whether it's like PDFs. Some people just I just want to read, skim, and call it a day. I don't want more than that. And I think that's another, part of that and driving that engagement is finding what works for your audience, what works well for your audience, so that they can process and learn information best. And I'm sure you guys have, we all create so much content. It's like so easy to create content. You're just content. And sometimes the best thing to do is take that content and say, okay, how do I use the same content that I used here, reapply it here, maybe make some modifications so it works best. So again, I think, you guys have both touched on really important parts of that engagement of engaging with your audience and getting your audience to engage with your training, with your material. Because being flexible is an important part of it, and it, as Elyce you said, it impacts the bottom line. Your team staying across there is going to impact the bottom line, which it takes us to the next point, which is proving the business impact. So now, let me just show a little data here. This is what is interesting data that we found recently that we talked to this from some customer who showed proprietary data about what's happening within their own system, showing the net revenue and the churn that occurs when their customers are trained. And it's mind blowing. It's really important information, and especially you guys are being asked to tasked with so many different things. There's a big push. I don't know who here in the audience were at SEDMA recently, but the big topic was how do I prove ROI for my business? How do I make business? How does customer education impact the business? So you're being asked to do a lot to show the business impact, and you want to also be able to speak the lingo, executive speak. I don't know if there's a term for that, but it's a whole nother language where you have to like take it, paste in ChatGPT, and say, okay, how do I say this if I'm talking to an executive? You can do a quick translate, better than Google Translate there. So I want to turn to you guys and ask, how are you guys measuring your impact? How are you proving that business impact, and how are you communicating that up? How are you training that upwards? Elyce, I'll.
Yeah. That's a big old loaded question, right? We had to start from what we know, from what's in our control. And we started with, how do we define a trained customer? Like, how do we try and put an account towards some type of metrics? Because it's not always objective, right? Everything, a lot of the stuff we do is subjective, hard to track. But as soon as we had a trained account definition, it started to expand, and we worked with some of our like operations teams, the folks that house the data, they keep the data, and they can help us turn the data into dashboards. And we just were honest with them. Hey, here's what we know. We know a trained account equals this. We got this data from Skilljar. How do we try and communicate this up to a C-suite level person that we are making an impact? And so they actually helped us by working with like CS and renewals. We were able to pull in health scores and tried to align with, okay, we have this number of customers that are trained. Let's see if we can correlate a high health score with a trained account, as you would assume it would be, and a low health score with a non-trained account. And it worked, right? What a surprise. So we're starting small by just using the data that we know we have. We don't have to recreate anything or recreate the wheel. That right there has been a good jump off conversation to if we were to make these changes, or if we had this plan in place, here is our hypothesis on how it would affect those health scores as well. So a lot of it's like trial and error. We're testing, we're doing pilots, all with the intentionality of how do we prove the impact that we can make. But if we didn't start somewhere, very challenging to even have those conversations. So I encourage that from the jump, or whatever you can define that helps people get into the mindset of what your team is doing, what your academy or learning can do for the business. And then the other piece of it is we got really creative with how else can we show impact. We started looking outside of AuditBoard. We started partnering with like bigger companies. We're a company for auditors. We build platforms and software for auditors to make their lives better. We went and talked to the IIA, which is the Institute for Internal Auditors, to see, is there a way that we could potentially partner on our content so that way we get a wider audience, not only for our current customers, but prospects. So lead generation, trying to think how that can add value. If numbers and money tend to be more of that C-suite language, let's try and attack it as much as we can. So we're really trying to think outside of the box when it comes to business impact, because it is so challenging to go from point A to point B equals we make an impact. That's been a starting point this year, those relationships, the way that we can try and advertise what we're doing internally, but also externally, we're hoping is something that can start showing, wow, this team is so crucial. This is something that we need to invest in and something that we need to continue working with.
I also think, you make a point of there. You also, it requires you to talk to the other teams and say, okay, tell me about how we're helping you. You also want to, you talk about what are we doing besides this, you talk about the academy, but, ask them, how have you seen the business impact? Talk to me, and how we can continue. And then having that communication, having advocates, I think from other points in the organization can be extremely helpful, especially if you're looking for more budget to grow your program. Alex, tell us a little about for yourself.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that advocates point right there at the end there. I think that that's a really good one. And it brings me back to what I think I've said about 3 times now. And I'm no comedian, but the rule of threes is like a thing where you can say things up to 3 times for it to be funny. You go to the 4th time, it's not funny. Well, in this case, the data story you tell and how you prove the impact kind of depends on your audience, right? And just acknowledging that up front is really important. So, you might have different shades of different things that are in the data that you present to different people, but having advocates who can tell you their perspective so you don't have to guess at it is really critical to getting that buy-in that lasts, right? So if I'm thinking about all of the different variations, I'll quickly get dizzy and I might not want to act on it, right? You get analysis paralysis. So where do I go from there and how we kind of approach this? Frankly, it's coming up with what's the common point. And for us as an organization, we have a set of values and we try to make every decision based off of those values and bounce things off of it. So if I'm thinking about how do I prove my impact, I look back to those values first. And, yeah, that's kind of anecdotal in some ways because values are words. Words are not necessarily numbers, but they're both terms of communication. And so, if I need to talk to an executive, I think what we call it, or what I've called it historically has been execu speak. If execu speak is very different than what I would say to somebody who's working more operationally on the content, for example. There may be very different things that each of them look at in terms of the numbers, but they both line up the same way towards the end outcome, right? So, you know, if something is not necessarily lining up with what we expected it to line up to, we need to understand, okay, thinking of our mission, our values as a company, what can we learn from this? And what can we apply moving forward from that learning and do it quickly? You're more often than not going to find something of value to be able to talk about and advocate for, even if something that you put together does not work out. A course that is meant to be 3 minutes long that you see somebody coming back to repeatedly might be an instance of, oh, that's not what we expected. Maybe that's reflecting on the product in some way. Maybe it's reflecting on the content in some way or the distribution of that content in some way. That's a valuable data point. We can use that to help prioritize things that we're planning on doing moving forward. Oh, well, they're coming back to this this video right before the renewal, for example. Oh, maybe that's an indicator that they're trying to re-engage with our product. So maybe we need to have our CS team get a little bit more proactive with things and recognize that there's certain content which, if we built this rapport and we're engaging our internal stakeholders as well, we can share with them and they can then share with that customer to re-engage them and get them to stay with you. But then on top of that as well, you've got upsell potential. And that's always going to be the case. Learning can also be a marketing tool. Marketing can also be a learning tool. It's the same thing and just through a different lens. And again, it's not all going to work. And yeah, it could be stressful because you're here to prove the business impact of your work. But it's important to be vulnerable because that's the only way that we're actually going to learn. Just like how our audiences for our academies, our universities, they have to be vulnerable to learn through the content that we share with them. So it seems only fair that we be as vulnerable as they are. That's how I prove business impact, just thinking about all these different things all at once. May sound crazy, but it works.
I think you're hitting it so well too, of like, often as I've gotten to know our customers in this space, for context, like I used to market to marketers, so very embedded. Just the world to me, it's like very mirroring, like head of content versus customer education. It's two sides of that coin of very similar fields of you're educating at what stage and at what point, and it's just this continuous storytelling again of like one thing might not work, but the other did. And to your point, if they keep coming back to the 3-minute video, I think Alex, to like nail maybe my fourth joke on this one, is they needed the 18 hours. They were like, where is my content? Like 3 minutes is not enough. I know I want that. So like you get that data and you're making these choices. And I think also what we basically are talking about is your day-to-day team needs to know kind of more in the weeds data, right? You're like, this course wasn't great, this was that, because that's what eventually impacts those bigger metrics. So like you're not going to share that whole story with your executive team. Like they don't need to know the monologue. They want to know what it ends up with, but that's the levers that you have to control to then impact those numbers that you're talking to your executives about. You're like, I know that if we change this course, more people will come back, they will be retained, we will have a higher retention rate with our customers. So you work with that as your own data set that then informs and connects to those, like higher level metrics. And I think when you talked about, you said something about stress or impact. And so I think that goes really well into our next topic around, let's be real. Like a lot of folks are working with smaller teams or changing team dynamics. People, the lean team quote that is out there on every LinkedIn news feed of, okay, great. How can you do more? You're across all these, like we said, you're actually like needing to spread content everywhere. It's supposed to be this perfect format. You have so many new learners. You want to scale content. How are you doing that realistically? And like a lot of folks are saying simply AI is the answer. I'm also very allergic to the thought of just like AI as a bucket because it can mean so many things used in so many contexts. So just really thinking about, yes, this is something that we have a future state, especially like recently with Gainsight talking about the agentic layer for like a post-sale team is going to be incredible. Like things that they can proactively spot, solve, and do for you so that, you can work smarter. But what else of today are you just actually doing, right? Like wanting to talk to people in real terms, the vulnerability of, okay, here's a couple things that I'm actually doing that are working versus some of the more like future things that we know are going to help us out. So, Alex, if you could get good old real talk on AI with us, we'll go to you.
Yeah, AI is an interesting one. I think the thing that I always think back to is the adage of people, process, and technology. No one thing can solve all your problems. So, I'm not necessarily bought into any one of those things, AI being a technology to solve all of the problems, but again, it could be useful. And, in our situation, we use it for ideation. It's just coming up with a lot of ideas very quickly. Sometimes that can be challenging. You don't want to spend internal resources all the time on every single little idea. They are very useful and you should definitely do that. But sometimes, you just need a quick couple of ideas about how to reframe something. And I use it for that. But frankly, my approach to trying not to burn out, which is an ongoing struggle. Everybody deals with this. So, if you feel like you're burning out right now, I get it. It's okay. It's just try to keep things simple. If you invest your time up front, and planning for the future, like what I described earlier. We have this certification. Yes, we've made jokes about the length of it, but it is very loved. But we have heard feedback that, not everybody finds that length useful. So it's like, oh, if we break that up, it allows us to create a simpler path forward for updating all of that content, for example, or adding in things based on gaps or new opportunities. And taking the time to sort of think that out up front is going to make it so much easier for us in the future. And so in theory, moving forward, once we have these pieces in place, we're less likely to burn out because it's more of a, oh, okay, well, we can slide this in here. We can move this around over there. And, part of what I like to think about is also just starting with what's a shared need. We have lots of different use cases for that certification for different roles. And some people need more, some people need less. So if we think about, okay, these are the topics that all of those people have in common, we can start with those first, and then we can figure out what the variations or the deviations and fringe cases are from there. And those deviations and fringe cases are often where you spend the most time and most effort trying to come up with a solution for. So at least this way, you're delivering value fast because hey, these things are really important for so many people. And then I can really spend more time later, which is really important in order to prove that return on investment that we were talking about a minute ago with something that would take more resources to complete. So again, that's just my approach. There's a million different approaches. I'm excited to hear what Elyce has to say about this one.
I was going to say, I like connecting those dots, and like Elyce and I were talking about this yesterday, of very much so relating to the content world. We're all honest about what AI can help with and what it can't. Like today, we'll be honest, we're at this lovely webinar that we have a full transcript. We're talking this conversation. There's going to be folks who weren't here today, who aren't video people, don't want to listen to the whole thing. Great. I can have basically an assistant help me identify some of the top things with my own coaching and what I thought, coming out of it. Like, this was what I thought was the most informative, and this is great. Can you pull a quote or two, or can you kind of like recap this so that I could send it to someone on my team who needs it for sales? And like working with it, like obviously saying kind of like it's your assistant, be very clear to review her, because sometimes, she can go and get a little loose with the rules that you implied to her. So always coming back and editing, which is where I think Elyce will share some fun stories. But it's the same thing on like the content side, that once you maybe build just like that core narrative, like really focusing on like you're putting it all out there, really using AI in smart ways to like really help with that segmentation thing that we all are working on. Like you have that internal knowledge of, I have like these 12 different kind of customers, different needs, different ways of liking the content. How might they like to consume it? And kind of starting just with that to help you get there quicker, so you can, spend that time at the end of your day instead of just having done all that content and then saying, oh shoot, I haven't scheduled an exec meeting in 3 months, and they don't know the progress, right? You get that a little bit of that time back, hopefully. So yeah, well, Elyce, AI me, tell me what you got.
Yeah, AI, we often joke it's like the fourth instructional designer on the team, that we love AI, but not all AI is created equal, of course. We're constantly getting folks that message us like, we saw this new AI tool on LinkedIn. It creates a bot that'll read off your script in a video, and won't that save time? Like, well, it could save time for some, but not necessarily for our use case. So it's partially trying to identify what will and will not be possible with AI. And then, like you said, work efficiently with the AI that you have. Like we just have Gemini, we have ChatGPT, Notebook LM. Some of the easiest wins with them have been, hey, rewrite my message for an executive audience. Right? Because I'm going to mutter on, I'm going to ramble in my Slack message. Can you just shorten it for me? And then it learns, oh, shorter is better, simplify is better. We had one instance, we're trying to expand our global footprint. We're going with localization for a lot of our content. So when we think about storytelling, how is a customer in Germany possibly going to interpret this story? How can we try and anticipate what somebody in Japan might see with this type of graphic? Now, it's not all going to be gold, like Caroline said, but are there things that we would never have considered or would have taken significant time to research that could be saved by that AI bot doing some of the work for us. How does it help protect our company? I was telling Caroline, we recently were interviewing for somebody for our team. We presented an assessment, and yes, the assessment was helped by AI to be created. We also submitted this assessment back into AI to say, what are possible answers that somebody might give us? And wouldn't you know it, somebody submitted an answer that was almost identical to what ChatGPT had told us. How would we have known that if we hadn't have done our due diligence and also tried to make sure that we're using AI responsibly and correctly? That's sad for that person, but it covered us, so that way we knew who we were actually looking to hire. So that's a happy and a sad example of AI, but in the end, how do we try and cover ourselves, save our time, so that way we're not starting from scratch? Because starting from scratch is heavy. It takes a lot of brain power. I would love to never have to start from scratch again. I'll lean on AI for that with, guidelines in place.
Yeah, I feel that story was my favorite. Honestly, it's one that's inspired many thoughts. We got onto some other ones yesterday that I definitely will think about. But I think the starting from scratch thing, especially like in the education space, it's kind of meta, but I think it goes against a lot of morals of like educators or writers of the thought of kind of like cheating or plagiarism with like AI, right? You're like, it kind of in the beginning, you're like, no, but I know how to write this. I don't want it to like take my voice or like seem like I did it this way. So it's all about really how you're using it. Like, for example, like being very transparent that everyone knows now you have access. It's great to say that you were just basically ping-ponging with a bot rapid speed that saves your coworker from having to talk to you for 15 minutes about your thought. Like I consider it, like a helpful thing that someone wasn't needing to like brainstorm with me for 15 minutes on Slack. And then I kind of like got it to a more clear point, right? And exactly like I think Elyce said, for most of us, it's like, please help me shorten this thought as I'm coming out of a long meeting, going into a meeting where I need to try to not be that person. So very helpful at kind of just like helping you navigate that day and being rightfully fair that we are using AI. And that way when teams are smaller, right? Like that is the trade-off that we are making is we are needing more support and trying to do more. So it should feel like an asset, but one that is heavily monitored. And, I've been very sometimes clear to mine. I'm like, don't try to be funnier than me. Okay. You're not, you got to be honest with them. But I think that's a lot of good wraps on how you can do that quickly in the near term. And then like, as we build to just the speed at which AI is coming and going to help us on a lot more strategic things too. So.
Great. And it just reminds me of one of my first bosses said, the scariest thing for a marketer or anybody is a blank piece of paper. That is the scariest thing in the entire world. You're going like, what do I have to write this blog. Where do I start?
And to think like that's the career I went into. My friends go, you decided to basically write like in like short language, like college essays for the rest of your life and live on that mode. And I was like, you know what? That is an interesting observation. Like my friends all know my schedule. They're like, ebook on Tuesday, webinar on Thursday. Caroline will be on deadline. So exactly, we're loving the like a little less blank space is very appreciated for a lot of us. Yeah.
Well, listen, we've been having an awesome conversation. I want to leave time for the audience to ask a couple questions. So again, this is the Q&A part. Please, if you have questions, we would love to hear from you. We threw a ton out at you. If there's any questions, please let us know. If you guys are a little too questions, which is fine. I know some people, we're also open with our emails. You can ping us all. You can go on our LinkedIn. You have all of our names here, and these are all names on LinkedIn as well. So you can even go onto our LinkedIn and ask us questions. Afterwards, we're going to be sending out an email with a recording, so you can send it to all your friends and go, this is what you missed. And then you could do is you could take that recording, take the transcript, put into AI, and say, what are the highlights? Because honestly, that's what we all do. And that's what you should all be doing too.
That's going to be on both of our blogs and in playbooks that you're going to get followed up with. Because
exactly,
we're here to just get it to you however you want it. So that's what we're here for from the news desk.
Exactly. So it doesn't seem like we're getting any questions. I hope the Q&A part was working. But if not, if it isn't, then I apologize for somehow. We've had this one time this happened actually where it wasn't working and no one told us until like halfway through. But hopefully it's working. And so, but I guess we don't have anything else. But thank you guys all for coming. Thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Elyce. Thank you, Skilljar, for joining us on this. And I thought this was a great conversation. Loved it. Loved what we had. I think there's a ton of value that everyone here can get. Pass on to your teams. Use it for your teams to grow. I think we can all learn a lot from it. And if you guys want, I'm going to throw a CloudShare pitch out here to mention that we will be having actually a webinar later this month. I mean next month in July. My dates are a little off here. Whatever it is, coming up soon. That will actually be a workshop, an AI workshop for customer educators. So you'll meet with two experts who are AI experts in customer education, and the tools they use. We're going to get hands-on. We're going to get real. So we will be sending that out as well. An invite for everybody. Caroline, anything else do you want to add in there?
I was like, we're CTA passing here. You know, I always say,
Yeah.
I'm like, and actually, next month we will also be having a webinar, but more about connecting the dots on proving that business impact from a CE to a CS to a CRO perspective. So if you want to come learn how to talk that exec speak, that maybe we will have some AI prompts now that I think about it, of just building that GPT for everyone. We'll be here. We're coming out very fast here once we were acquired by Gainsight. So a lot of content coming out this summer on really connecting all these dots. So you'll definitely be hearing from us. And again, such a great group of folks today, and this conversation I could have for weeks. So let's wrap it, and then you'll hear from us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye bye.